Work session in Annapolis City Council will be called to order on Thursday, November 17th at 3:02. Welcome 301, welcome everybody. Very excited to have you all here. At this time, would you all join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mr. City Attorney, please present the first item.
Yes, sir. The first item on the agenda is a presentation, ID-250-22, Anne Arundel County Public School Superintendent Dr. Mark Bedell and Board of Education President Dr. Joanna Bache-Tobin.
It is an honor to have you guys here with us. Alderman Pindell-Charles wanted to say a few words just before we get started.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm thrilled to have the leadership at our Anne Arundel County Public Schools and Board of Education here today. When I made this request in late June, I was thrilled and no hesitation at all. And I want to thank Alderwoman Finlayson for indicating that we needed to have the questions done ahead of time. I thought that was a perfect suggestion, and I think that's very helpful. And I know based on your report that she met with you all last week. So as our Annapolis Education Commission person, representative for us, we thank her and we thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you.
All right, welcome. Sure.
Now am I on? Yes. I'm used to being on the other side of these meetings, so. So good afternoon, I'm Joanna Tobin. I am a member of the Board of Education representing District 6, which of course includes Annapolis City. And I currently serve as president of the Board of Education. I was elected to this position in November of 2020. It is my great pleasure and privilege to be here today and to say a few words about our new superintendent, who you're about to meet, Dr. Bedell. As many of you are aware, we undertook at the board a hiring process which consumed most of the first half of this year. We were very fortunate to have close to 50 outstanding applicants from across the country, but nobody as outstanding as Dr. Bedell. He brings a wealth of experience. He comes to us having most recently been the superintendent in Kansas City, Missouri. He may say a few things about that. Let's just say he worked some real miracles there, and they were very sad to see him leave. But we were very happy to see him come. And prior to that, he was in Baltimore County as assistant superintendent over the high schools, and lived in Anne Arundel County during that time. So he had previously lived in Anne Arundel County before coming here. I should say that Dr. Bedell is considered one of the leading urban educators in the country. We are incredibly fortunate to have him here. He brings everything that I believe we need in this district. He has said, and I'm inclined to agree with him, we have a good system, but we should and can have a great system. And that is his goal and our goal on the Board of Education. I should say that he was chosen by the Board of Education in an enthusiastically unanimous vote. And if you know our board, that's quite something. And so it is a mark of his abilities, his outstanding qualifications, and frankly, just his human qualities that he was able to do that. Finally, let me just say, some of you know that in my day job, I've spent close to 20 years, among other things, moderating leadership seminars for the Aspen Institute, and I've coached many, many leaders over the years, and I know one when I see one. And when Dr. Bedell walked into that room, I knew that this was one extraordinary person who could take this school system to, frankly, anywhere he wanted to take it. So we are honored to be here today. I think, obviously, it's very important that we have a strong relationship with the city. I obviously represent this district, but it is such a core part of the county. And there are many specific challenges around the needs of our students here in the city of Annapolis. And I think you will find Dr. Bedell an incredible partner as we work towards the best possible outcomes for our students in every way. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Bedell.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Tobin, to Mayor Buckley, members of the Annapolis City Council. Thank you all for having us, and to those who are here listening to this presentation, we appreciate your presence today. That is an amazing introduction that I don't feel like I really deserve. I tell people that the work that I did in Kansas City, that's the work I did there. I have to try to create my own legacy here in Anne Arundel County through action. And what I hope will happen is, as we go through this presentation today, there'll be a number of your questions that are answered. And those that we aren't able to answer, our goal will be to try to get an answer for those questions. I am thankful to this Board of Education for choosing me as their candidate to lead this school district. There were only 2 school districts in the country that I had an interest in applying to, and that was Alief ISD outside of Houston, where I lived, and the other area that I lived in was Anne Arundel County Public Schools. And whichever one came open first was what I would go after. About a month after I was announced here, Alief ISD came open. And so it worked out the way it was supposed to work out. I am supposed to be here for a time such as this. And I like for people to know that I don't take any of this for granted. I'm appreciative of this board and their boldness, and also taking a look at the issues that I have taken on in Kansas City, and regardless of that, saying, hey, we want somebody that will come here and that truly will focus on our kids. And I do believe in focusing on our kids, and you will hear that throughout this presentation. That is how you actually can move from good to great. You have to focus on everybody, regardless of where they show up and where they currently exist. What is going to be your value add in moving kids from one area to another? And so that means challenging our kids who are struggling learners. The average learners need to move up, and the high achievers have to be pushed. And we have to be a value-added school district if we want to be great. So I am thankful that I have this opportunity to be able to work with you all. And we're gonna do some phenomenal things in this school district over the next several years. So let's get into the presentation. Let me make sure it's on. All right. We're on now. So one of the things that you do as a new superintendent is you come in and you introduce your 100-day plan. And the 100-day plan allows for the superintendent to truly focus on a number of areas that I believe are critical to me having the ability to make the future decisions that are going to move this school district forward. And so in this 100-day plan, we have 5 goals, 5 areas of focus that we are looking at. School governance, so that's all about building a relationship with the school board and making sure that we create a transparent, trusting, and collaborative working relationship. You will hear a lot about transparency from me, and there will be concrete examples of how I live through transparency and being honest with people about what our struggles are and what our strengths are. And I think that is working now with this board, because that way you don't ever have to worry about, I wonder how they think I feel about this issue or that issue. I'm a very direct person. I'm very direct and I'm very honest. And it has served me well. Focusing on our instructional programming So we're putting an RFP out, that will go out here in a few days to take a deeper look at our curriculum to make sure that, do we have a curriculum that's viable? Is it aligned to state standards? Do all of our kids see themselves in the curriculum reflected from a resiliency lens, rather than, in some cases, students being reflected in curriculum from a deficit lens? We are becoming a more and more diverse school district, and it is incumbent on us that we do everything to show that we're being intentional and welcoming of this ever-changing population that is coming into Anne Arundel County, and you'll see some of that in a little bit. We also want to make sure that we're providing first-class service to those that we serve from central office. Are we an efficient and effective organization that is able to make life a lot easier for those who are in the trenches? And also making sure that we haven't forgot what it's like to be in the trenches. There are a number of us who are now in these senior level positions. We taught, we were administrators, department chairs. I was a substitute teacher. I have worked in every aspect of education, from a substitute teacher all the way up to being a superintendent, including working in an alternative school for 3 years. So I have a very vast amount of experience in understanding the different lens of what our people are dealing with. Creating a culture of trust through action. So if you want people to stay in your organization, you have to create a climate and culture that is conducive to making people want to stay. In the absence of being able to compensate people at the level that we should, and you should see a slide on that later, we have to do some things differently to show a greater level of appreciation, in particular to a workforce that is dwindling, that is becoming much more competitive. And we have to do our part in Anne Arundel County to try to hold on to the people that we have, while also trying to recruit people so that we can fully staff our schools. And then lastly, doing what I'm doing right now, establishing trust and confidence from the community at large, making sure that I'm speaking to our elected officials, advocacy organizations, parents, random people in the community, and just giving these stakeholders an opportunity to give us feedback on how we can do better in serving the children here in Anne Arundel County. These are some of the entities that I have met with over during my first 100 days, and you can see it's a wide variety of different groups. Many of these groups have interests that compete against each other, but one thing that I have found that's in common with everybody is they want a great education for their kids. They want to know that are our schools safe? Do we have competent educators and leaders running these schools? And is the school moving in the right direction from a progress standpoint? That's one thing that's in common with everybody. So my job as a superintendent is to work with each of these groups and to figure out how can we take those commonalities and ultimately over time build a strategic plan that everybody agrees to that would allow for us to have direction over the next 5 years. And I look forward to continuing to meet with these different groups periodically so that we can make sure that they're informed on the direction of the school district. Listening and learning tours, they will start on November 28th. And this is an opportunity now for me to hear directly from parents and community members. My goal is to introduce myself during these listening and learning tours, let people understand who I am, what I stand for, and give people some confidence that I am a superintendent that know how to do this work. And then I want to hear from people. What are the things that you view as a strength in this school district? What are your concerns? What are things that we need to no longer do? And what are your aspirations? What do you want for the future? We will do 16 of these. This will then allow for us to take all of that data and triangulate it and figure out what are the emerging themes in those 3 areas. How do we then begin to build out a strategic plan that takes into account the things that we need to do, that we need to continue to do, the things we don't need to do anymore, and what are the future aspirations? So then what will happen is at the conclusion of these 100 days, there will be a post-entry plan, and that plan will be presented to the board and the community. That plan will allow for me to share all of the findings in those 5 areas around what I've discovered about the school district. And then that post-entry plan becomes the foundation for us building out a new strategic plan. That process will begin in May of 2023. So we'll put an RFP out during the second semester and bring in an outside consultant that will help us build our strategic plan. Now, I'm one of those type of superintendents. I like to be very quick and to the point. We don't need a 300-page strategic plan. You need a 40-page strategic plan that's quick and to the point. It talks about the things that adults need to do in order for children to hit their goals. And we want to build out a strategic plan that truly is community oriented, because it shouldn't be dependent on the superintendent. Superintendents come and go. So the plan needs to be a community-driven plan that will live beyond me or any other superintendent that comes on board. So that's the plan there. I believe that the framework around how this strategic plan should be built out should always have a focus on equity. And people oftentimes think equity is only focusing on low socioeconomic status kids. Equity is about that, but it's also about how do you serve your district as a whole. So if I have kids over in South County that we're not able to get to and from school, we've in essence created an inequity because we can't get them to school. Now that creates inequitable outcomes in how these kids are being educated. And then there's that other focus around equity when we take a look at how the system has been designed to create inequities and to be able to say these inequities have to be addressed through resource allocation. And when you do this work the right way, everybody wins. We did it in Kansas City. I have the data. We nearly eliminated the achievement gap of black kids against black kids in math, reading, and science. My white kids had the widest gaps in Kansas City. And by the end of the time that I was there, my white kids were outperforming white kids in the state of Missouri in both English and science. And they had shaved their achievement gap by 50% against white kids in math. So I go very granular when I look at data. How are we closing gaps? And how are we making sure that we're competitive, not only within our school district, but against the state as a whole? That's how you go from good to great. Kansas City was the first school district in the United States to lose its full accreditation in 2000. And we got it back January 11th of this year. 22 years, 6 years of hard work, and we got the district's its full accreditation. And you don't get that not being intentional around the data. You also don't get it by not being honest with the community about where you're struggling. So I believe in putting all of it out there. So we're going to start doing deep data dives. My team have started doing that. We're going to do deep data dive workshops with the board so that they can see where we are and what areas we really need to focus on in order to close gaps, in order to make this district a great district. We have to focus on innovation. We're antiquated, we're outdated, we're very rigid. The model is no longer relevant for the kids that we serve today. And in many cases, we as adults still want kids to learn the way that we've learned. Information is instant, and it comes to these kids at a much faster rate. So this chalkboard era of how we educate kids is no longer relevant. We have to prepare them for the world that they're graduating into, which is a technologically advanced world. And I think many of us got exposed around the country when COVID hit. We had districts that said we were 1-to-1. Kansas City was 1-to-1 in 2015. When it was time to be 1-to-1, when we had to close schools, we had to send work packets home. So when we talk about, and then not even taking into account the Wi-Fi inequities that exist in some of our rural areas and our urban areas, right? We weren't ready for that. So as a school district, we have to talk about innovation. What does a non-traditional school year look like? What does a non-traditional school day look like? And if the law is telling us that by the end of 10th grade, our kids have to be college or career ready, then by the time they hit the 11th grade, maybe we're offering a flex schedule for these kids so that they can actually get their internship opportunities and experiences during the school day. Maybe the high schools have to be open from 8:30 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. And kids get to choose their schedules by the time they're in the 11th grade. Some of them hybrid, some of them in person. But for some of our kids who have to work to help make ends meet, the current system doesn't take into account the experiences that they get to have. Because if they have to go and work, they don't have time for internships. But if that's built into the school day, that helps us from a market value asset attainment standpoint. And that's something we'll talk about as we build out our strategic plan. Focusing on social, emotional, and the academic growth of students. So we have to grow our kids on those three continuums. If you don't address the emotional and the social aspect of our kids, it's going to be an impediment to them reaching their full academic potential. So we have to do all of that, but in order to master those two, we have to have help from people like you all. We have to have help from all of the different entities that are here to serve as advocates for our students. Schools can't do this alone. And if we're having to be the greatest service-oriented entity, you can't then be the greatest educational institution. You can't be great at both of them. So this is where we say schools can't do it alone, and we have to have the community to help us. And then that fourth area is just adherence to Blueprint. It's a law. So it needs to be embedded in the strategic plan so that we are doing everything that the law is dictating that we have to do. So let's talk about some of the challenges. We've had a lot of transportation issues over the last several years. This is not just an Anne Arundel County Public School issue. I was driving kids last year in Kansas City as a superintendent. For a 3-week period, I was taking a kid to school. And so it's a national issue, but we can't sit here and say, well, it's a national issue, so this is just what it's going to be. So I've challenged my staff to think outside the box, because I'm the type of superintendent, I'm not interested in people saying, this is just the way that it is, so this is all, we can't do anything. Like, that's what gets people fired with me, right? I'd rather you try 10 things and fail at it, and that's gonna keep you employed because at least you trying. But to try to do anything is unacceptable to me. So I challenged the transportation team, and I told them, you have a week to come with some alternative plans here, because I know they exist. And they came with a beautiful plan that I actually presented to the board a couple of months ago that is now coming to fruition. So we have 67 current bus driver vacancies, 59 potential drivers currently in training. We're beginning discussions on route identification for potential changes at semester break, because I came out and I said to people, no family should have to go a whole year without transportation. All of us are going to have to feel some of this pain one way or another. The board last night approved the emergency procurement contract vans last night. So that means this third bullet here won't be as severe as we once thought that it would be. And here's what it looks like. Now we're going to take these vans and we're going to use those to transport non-public students. That will free up 24 buses. Approximately 2,600 students now will be able to receive additional bus service. This could provide partial routes with total coverage and add more partially covered routes. The plan also is to address some general and magnet routes in the Annapolis, Broadneck, North County, and Old Mill clusters, and we believe that this will fix all of the no service issues in the Meade cluster, which was one of the hardest hit clusters at the beginning of the school year. We also are working on making sure that these final routes determinations are still being made. Coverage is planned to begin on December 5th and December 12th. Initial communications to families of non-public students is taking place this week. We will have dry runs on the traditional routes over the Thanksgiving week, and then follow-up communication with all impacted families will take place during the week of November 28th. So short-term, we have our RFP bid that was in and was approved. That's going to give us a number of vans, 26 vans. This doesn't require the drivers to have a CDL, but those drivers will go through the similar training that CDL training requires of them. Ultimately, this will now become a potential grow your own model. So as they're driving these vans, we can start to work to help them towards their CDL, so these people can move up and be able to drive school buses. So it's a pipeline in essence. It also gives our school district more autonomy, because we're going to start building out our own fleet, right? We want to have these alternative modes of transportation because a CDL is much more competitive now than it's ever been. So it means that we have to revisit the importance of a CDL at our level if we can't pay people $60,000, $70,000, $90,000 to drive like Amazon and some of these other companies can. So we have to look at alternative things. Long term, we're going to do another RFP. We'll pick up another 40. That implementation will be for July 1. That's going to help us open up the upcoming school year in a much better situation than we were in this year. And then ongoing, we're going to continue to work this. We're looking at purchasing 5 per year. And that's just the TBD on those pieces because that is ongoing. We are increasing in educating an increasingly diverse student body, both in demographics and needs. Here's what the data is telling us, everybody. Over a 10-year period, look at our white student population. It's declined by 6,000 students. Look at our Hispanic population, our ELL population, our Latinx population. From 15,000, that's the black population, from 15,000 to 8,000, black or African American. The Hispanic population has doubled, from 7,800 to 15,700. So you can see the shifts. 2 or more races have jumped up by almost 1,200 students. Asian population has jumped up some. So the school district is becoming more and more diverse. And we have to make sure that our kids understand that they're being reflected in a very positive way in everything that we do in this county. And that's the reason why I talk about curriculum and looking at how curriculum is written and looking at who's reflected in the curriculum. And we want to have a company, a vendor help us with that so that we can show that we are a very inclusive school district here in Anne Arundel County. Staff shortages and compensation. I mean, this is, quite frankly, to me, it's embarrassing. Right? I come from a school district that was the highest in teacher salary starting. We had just got it up to the highest this spring. And then St. Louis, and I want to say Kansas City, Kansas public school districts outpaced us after they finished their negotiations, but we were still in the top 3. We were the tops at the end of the salary in Kansas City. Nobody in my school district was making less than $15 an hour. I come to Anne Arundel County, we have people making $12 and some change in some of the departments. It's embarrassing. My same house that I have in Kansas City is roughly valued at about $200,000 more here for that same house because of the cost of living here. So we have people not even on a livable wage, which is going to explain some of our data here, why we have the kind of vacancies that we have. This is average teacher salary compared to state average. It's 24 school districts. Anne Arundel is the 9th lowest in average teacher salary. I want you to take a look at the districts we compete with. Montgomery County, they're number 1. Howard is number 2. Prince George's is number 4. These are the counties that I'm competing with for staff. And they are at the very bottom because of how they fund their school districts. And I recognize that we have a tax cap here in Anne Arundel County. Because if we are considered the 3rd wealthiest county, then my attitude would be, shouldn't we be down here somewhere? But we're not. And it gets even worse when you look at this slide. This is minimum teacher salary. We're ranked 19 out of 24. So the thing that I try to tell people, you want to be great, it does cost. Right? Montgomery and Howard, they're considered pretty great school districts, but they also are able to fully staff their districts because they're much more competitive. They're able to pay more for bus drivers. So these are the things that I'm looking at, and I'm saying to our elected officials, our county executive, we have to close this gap against a lot of these school districts. We know that we also have to adhere to the Maryland Blueprint Law. So we talk about those things. There's a lot of financial and logistical requirements. That's a reality. And some of these are not funded. So it requires that we're going to have to take a deep look at how we're spending in our school district. And we're going to have to take a look from an equity standpoint that we have teachers who are board certified that don't even qualify based on how the law is written. So then that has to be funded by us if we want to make sure that we are able to make sure that all of our teachers who are national board certified get the $10,000. So we have to take a look. That's why I say equity is embraced in so many ways, and it has to be embraced in so many ways. But this is something that we have to navigate through, and it's going to be a tough piece for us to navigate through, although I absolutely believe in the intent of what it wants to focus on. We talk about history of racism and bigotry, addressing the hard truth. I had a chance to attend the event that happened, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and just learning my history of what happened here as this being a slave port and how race has played out. And oftentimes, people don't want to talk about it. People want to ignore it or turn their head the other way, as if these things don't play into the way that the system is currently designed and how it operates, right? And it's not about shaming white people and making white people feel bad. I said this to my board. But it is about us saying that we have to have this conversation in order for us to move forward. If we truly want to be a phenomenal county, these conversations have to happen. We got interesting dynamics here in Anne Arundel County, right? When you talk about redistricting, this isn't about, I don't want my kids with those kids. That's one factor. We got issues here where I got white communities saying, I don't want my white kids in this community with these white kids. So it's a reality of the type of conversations that we have to have if we really want to become a truly inclusive county. And it's addressing the hard truths. It's the work that I did in Kansas City. And we were able to move things and do things there because we had these conversations. So I want to make sure that people understand that as a school district, these are things we have to face. We can't be afraid to talk about it if we want to be great. Closing the gaps. We recognize that there's a history here with the NAACP and feeling that the school district was not serving African American students properly, wasn't educating them properly. So we got sued as a school district. And we entered into an MOU around how we're going to make sure that we show improvement of the educational and academic attainment among African American students. They tend to lag at the lowest levels almost on every measurable indicator. So what are we doing about it? And how do we demonstrate to this community that we are focused on making sure that we're closing gaps across the board? So that's part of that deep data dive conversation that we're talking about. So we also said, let's bring some data because there has been some progress, right? You look at our graduation rates in our county, and the county has moved up to 90% graduation rate. It's a beautiful thing. So 9 out of 10 of our kids are graduating, but we still have a large number of kids who aren't graduating when you look at the data in the aggregate of a district this size. But then when you look at the student groups, you can see the progress that's been made. A significant increase with our African American student population. Our free and reduced lunch students, a significant increase. Special education. So the district is making progress as we're working on looking at closing gaps in some of these areas. Here's student suspensions, right? So we talk about what we're looking at from the aggregate of all students. And you still see the disparities in the suspension rates when you look at 5.95% compared to 12.31. They're still being suspended twice as much as their peers across the system. So these are things that we still have to work on as we focus on how we work with all of our student groups, the type of trainings, the type of implicit bias trainings, all of those kind of things that play out. And look, I'm going to share a story with you, and this will hurt some of your hearts, because I was guilty for this. I was an assistant principal in the Houston Independent School District, and I was responsible for 9th and 11th graders. And I kept telling this one kid in the 11th grade, man, I need you to pull up your pants. Pull up your pants, man. Really didn't know his name. He'd look at me and frown, continue to walk. Wasn't sagging that much. I'm like, I want your pants around your waist. And one day, I'm driving to work, somebody pulls out in front of me, I blow my horn, they're clearly in the wrong. They flipped the bird. I lost it. By the time I got to school, I already had a terrible attitude. I go and see this kid, and I saw him in the hallway. I say, man, pull up your pants. He didn't. He kept walking. Hey, come with me, man. I'm about to suspend you. Just because he didn't do what I want to do, I'm going to show you the kind of power that I have. So I brought him to my office and was getting ready to process the paperwork, and this kid put his hand on my shoulder. I turned around and looked at this kid. He had a tear coming down his face. And he said, man, Mr. Bedell, you mean to tell me you about to suspend me? You don't even know me? I mean, yeah, I'm sagging a little bit, but I don't get in trouble. I come to school every day. I go to class. I mind my business. You ride me for no reason. Maybe if you took time to get to know me, you would know that I'm homeless. And I'm coming to school every day and trying to do the best that I'm doing, and you getting ready to put me back out into the streets where I have nowhere to live. And it floored me. And I thought about that. I thought about how often does that happen to kids, right? Because I took my biases around how I don't like to see kids sag, but here's what's crazy about it. I sagged back in the 90s. Now I'm making some money and I done moved up from a socioeconomic status and I done lost that perspective, and I'm telling this kid based on the way that I think you should behave and act that this is what you should do. This kind of stuff happened to kids all the time. And what ends up happening is for punitive things like that, you get this disparity. Happens all the time. So this isn't about a black or white thing. I'm telling you as a black man, I did it. So when we tell people we need this implicit bias training, we're saying that it is for everybody, because we all show up with some level of bias, and if we don't check it at the door, we harm kids. So that's the work that we have to do and talk about if we want to eliminate these types of things. AP course enrollment. So all students in grades 9 through 12, we have 28%. African American students, 19% that are enrolled in one or more class. Hispanic students, 18.4%. Two or more races, 29.9%, and our white students are at 34%. So when you look at these gaps, right, it's pretty significant between these gaps with Hispanic and African American students. The question is it that they can't do it, or is it that we have this gatekeeper mindset that only certain kids are invited because a teacher is saying, I want you to take this class? Now, I wrote a dissertation, 146-page dissertation. I'm writing a book right now. I never got invited to take an AP class. It wasn't because I couldn't do the work, just never got invited. So we have to change this mindset, and the goal is open it up for kids who want to take it. And then put the supports in there so these kids can have success. And just the rigor of them taking these type of courses puts them on a much stronger foundation as they get ready to enter into college. Exposure is everything. So that's the type of thinking that we have to have in this school district if we want to eliminate these types of disparities. AP examination participation, you can see the data. 63% of the kids who are enrolled out of that 34%. But only 11.8% out of the 18% are taking the AP exams. The Hispanic population, 11%. IB, here's the same thing. You can see where the data is telling us our kids are. So we're going to continue to go granular with this data as we work on eliminating disparities in this county. Readiness for kindergarten. Here's your data on that, based on our kindergarten readiness assessment fall of 2021. You can see percent emerging for our white kids, 15.3, approaching 35.1, demonstrating 49.7. Overall, 39% of our kids are in that demonstrating category. And then you can look at our African American, our Hispanic population. That data tells you a story. Is it because we're getting more and more kids in who are English language learners? And they simply, at this point, don't have the ability to understand how to take this test in English. We know that there's federal law that tells you that if you're in a school district for 1 year, whether you have acquired English or not, you have to take the reading assessment. So a school district that has a large share of Hispanic ELL kids those school districts are already going to get hit on their data in a very negative way, where you don't have a fighting chance because the kids haven't been in long enough to learn the language. So these are the things that we want to be able to look at, and we want to be able to talk to the community about what that data means and how can we get help from the community on this so we can solve this together. Here's reading performance, K through 5, and you can see the data here. 51.6% of our kids, and this was spring of 22, are meeting or exceeding the standard. And then you can see the student groups and what it looks like across our county, and you can see the gaps. They're pretty similar everywhere you look at. I wanted to share this with you because we haven't gotten our state data back yet in Kansas City, here. So we only gotten back our science data. We haven't gotten reading or math from when the kids took it in the fall. But this is trend data over the last 3 years in my former school district. This is the report card. You can see when they measure the data of the work that we were doing in the Kansas City Public School District, look at how we were outperforming and outgrowing kids across the state of Missouri. That's the normal curve equivalency. And we, in most of our student groups, were exceeding the performance of the state. So this is the work that I want us to be able to do here. I want to be able to come back to you and show you all how our school district is closing gaps at a much faster rate against other school districts in this state, and then to be able to go granular and look at these student groups. This is why we were able to get our full accreditation back. We were closing gaps on urban school districts in the country. If you look at the key performance indicators from the Council for Great City Schools that they report every year, from the bottom 25th percentile up into the top 25th percentile and the 50th percentile on most of those KPIs. So all I'm telling you is we're not far away here from being a great school district, but we have to be intentional. And if we're intentional, everybody can watch out. These are the gap closures that I was telling you all about. Those gap closures that we had, 2016 when I started, that gap in English language arts was 12%. That gap was down to 3.2, right? So you can see the gap for our white students, 12.4 down to 1.2. But we didn't do well with our ELA Hispanic student group. So what it required me to do was to start an international welcome center where we could concentrate all of our resources to give that student population a better chance at being successful, because our resources were spread out throughout the school district. So it just requires us to look at data and respond to it in a meaningful way that's going to allow for our kids to have the most success. Current political climate, you all know where we are. You know what's happening around this country with education and how it is politically polarized, and we have that here in our county. So our goal is to just recognize that these things are real and to strategically work with all of these groups so that we can make sure that some of what people want, they get, but everybody's not getting everything that they want. It just doesn't work that way. You can't be everything to everybody and be successful. But there are things that we can do to let people know that we're listening to them, and that's our commitment. Some of the strategies, ensuring equity, as I talked to you all about, for all students and staff across the school district. Collaborating, making sure that everything is working together, that we're innovating, we're developing our students, and we have guiding principles that will help us get there. Attacking compensation gaps. We have to be much more competitive in how we're paying our staff. And if we're able to do that, there are people who want to come and work in Anne Arundel County. I've had people tell me, I'd love to come and work for you. I can't take the pay cut. There are people who want to come here and teach. I can't take the pay cut, Dr. Bedell, to come. And they live in this state. So we will work on these things, and these are the things that I would say to you all, that we need your advocacy and your support in order for us to be competitive, because we're not that far away from being a great school district. I promise you. So with that being said, we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you so much. I'll move
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate your time. I had a couple of questions. My first question is on the transportation slide as it related to the pilot program. You mentioned non-public students. What exactly is the definition of a non-public student?
All right, so a non-public student is a student that the school district, we're having to send these kids to, I would say, non-public sites. So if there are kids that we just can't provide services for, we have to send them to a partner, I don't want to say a vendor, but yeah. So where they can get their specialized services that the school district can't provide. And what ends up happening is because they're so spread out in terms of how we have to transport them, in many cases, we have a school bus with only 3 kids on it that could hold up to 60 or 72 kids that we're having to transport our non-public kids because by law, we have to provide transportation for them, our McKinney-Vento kids, and our special education students. So utilizing these minivans will make that a lot easier, and it will free up buses that now can allow for us to transport far more students.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a great micro-transit plan. I just was like, wait, non-public? I didn't understand.
Actually, can I just add something super quick? A lot of these routes are very long because, I mean, in some cases you're going to Kennedy Krieger in Baltimore, you're going to, so there are real implications. You're taking a bus out of service for the entire day for 2 or 3 kids. And also, frankly, the fuel usage is huge there. So this is an efficiency on many, many counts.
I won't get into the electrification of you got to get the vehicles first and then you can get to, more energy efficient vehicles. A second question, same vein, I used to take the homeless bus from Sarah's house when we lived in a shelter when I was in middle school and high school. And I understand students still do that. A number of children in my ward actually do that, getting back and forth from the hotels on Riva Road or even the Sarah's House facility. How can those routes better be fixed to meet the needs of our most vulnerable population? For example, there are elementary school students who attend an Annapolis cluster school, but because their shelter may be in Glen Burnie or Severn, they're getting on a bus at 6 a.m., then being transferred from the high school to the middle school and then to the elementary, et cetera. How can that be fixed? Understanding the circumstances that they're already homeless, to better just meet their needs.
Well, the only thing I can say to you, I would say as we begin to purchase more and more of these vans, I mean, that the intention is to take care of those, I would say, like outlier routes. Kids that because of McKinney-Vento, we have to make sure that we get them to school, and some of those routes are extremely long. So some of these kids can live outside of the county, and we still have to go pick them up and bring them to and from. So the intent of that is to also look at utilizing some of these vans to kind of help address some of what you're talking about, which would make it a much more efficient process in getting our homeless kids to and from school.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Also, I had a question. I didn't see a mention, I'm sure you're working on it, but I didn't see mention of trade or community college programs and partnerships. Obviously, we have I forget the exact name. Is it?
The dual enrollment?
No, yeah. What's the accreditation statewide where you can go 2 years?
Get your associates.
Yeah. So we have programs like that.
Yeah.
But, and I think, how we could help it in the city is obviously providing the transportation to the community college or supplementing small scholarships, et cetera. But how can the school step up to meet the need of particularly trades? I went to Cat South. I loved Roxanne Hubbard. Shout out to her. I was in the dental assisting program, went all the way up, took the test, everything. It was fantastic. And it was a great trade to be able to have. So how can those opportunities be expanded more?
Yeah, so college, career, and life is going to be a huge part of our strategic plan. It's also a huge part of Maryland Blueprint. So it is by law that we have to make sure that as we're moving kids through, that by the end of their 10th grade year, we've gotten them career ready or have them on a college and career readiness track. I was a kid like you. I was homeless just like you. I went to a voc ed high school in upstate New York, and I did electrical construction. And my senior year, I was able to go to Kodak and do 3 hours of internship getting paid while earning my credit my senior year, getting practical experience. So when I talked to you all earlier about looking at how do we take a different look at the school day, it's in response to what you're asking of us right now, to be able to meet the demands of making sure that our kids are getting those experiences to internship and to take what they're learning and apply it in a practical way in the real world, from a real world aspect. So that is going to be something that's big in our school district, and it's something that we already, as we're going through the budget, part of my recommendation in our budget is an enhancement in that area as we, for the upcoming school year. So, and that is in adherence to the Maryland Blueprint law.
That's awesome. And I think that's why I didn't realize the similarities in personal backgrounds, but I think that's why it's important. And it was important to me when they hired you. I went to Anne Arundel County Public Schools all but 4 years. I went to Baltimore City as well. Every teacher I had really was white, female, and all of the administrators were white females or white males. I'm old. I'm like talking Chris Truffer time all the way back then, who I loved. So it's so good to just that you have that lived experience and that you can share that with our students. I do have questions, and when you showed the demographics and the changes in the school year, I looked at my colleague and I said white flight, and particularly with two schools in my district. Georgetown East Elementary School, it's actually a 7, but a majority of this kids from Bay Ridge students do go to Georgetown East Elementary, and from off of Tyler a little bit. It's in your district, but my kids go there, as well as Tyler Heights Elementary School, which is directly in my district. Almost 98% minority in some way, shape, or form. How do you address those issues as it relates to equally funding their extracurricular activities and just life experience that they need? The Arlington Echo camps, the science camps, just STEM learning. How do you make sure that the investment is still there when there is so much white flight and there is a reduction in their PTA funding and their overall funding from the board?
Yeah, I think over time, the goal is to look at possibly 13 to 15 different variables in trying to kind of quantify where your schools are in terms of need. So when we talk about applying an equity lens, that's what we're talking about doing. So it's not taken away from your high achieving schools, right? And this is what I've had to say to a group that I met with, like as a superintendent in Kansas City, I never created an inequity for one student group in order to fix an inequity for another student group, right? The goal is to recognize that there are inequities that exist, and then you have to look at how you from an educational equity standpoint, how do you fund those schools that may be under-resourced because of how kids are showing up? But you want to be able to run data that will kind of tell you how you need to tier your schools and what kind of supports they get. And that's the thing. If you're able, I tell people, you lift the bottom, and if the bottom is a heavier weight holding your system down, right? You lift that, your system's going to move a lot faster. But I'm one of those superintendents, you're going to move middle achieving kids, and even I've told my principals, we got kids in Severna Park and schools like that, they're not being pushed like they need to be pushed. How are you ranked a 8 or 9 on the great school rating, but we only pumping out 2 National Merit Scholars, right? So those kids can show up in many cases, like my children who are resourced, they can show up, and my daughter report card just came in. She's in the 6th grade, all A's and 1B at Bates Middle, right? She's gonna do fine. I wanna know, where's the value add for her? How are we pushing her? So you gotta look at it from that continuum, and then you make sure that you allocate your resources to help move and close those gaps even faster. But you gotta do it through a data-driven way that eliminates the subjectivity.
That's so great to hear, really. And I'm a Bates graduate as well. And there's the intercity beef, Annapolis versus Bates all day. Diane Bragdon, and I also had Paul DeRue as my principal as well. I'm not sure if he's still there. My last question: the African American suspension rate stood out to me obviously that was even a problem when I was in school. African Americans were suspended at much higher rates than their counterparts. And I think the reason that it concerns everyone really is because we obviously see the reflection in our criminal justice system. We're a very wealthy state. We have the highest percentage of African Americans, males arrested in the entire country, but we also have the number one body of African American elected Democrats in the entire nation as well. That doesn't make sense to me that, we have such successful rates of African American, but at the same time, we still punish our kids at a much higher rate. How do you plan to address that without further criminalizing and penalizing African American students? I know, particularly at Annapolis High School, significant issues. How is that addressed? And I'll tie this in there as well so my colleagues can go. What is the community partnership to schools or community partnership plan for schools? For example, if a fight happens in Robinwood or something happens in Robinwood, I know that there's a very good chance that Tuesday at Annapolis High School there could be a fight, or Tuesday at Annapolis Middle School there could be a fight. Where is the intercommunication between communities to try to also curb that problem?
Yeah, I think that's part of when we talk about creating this culture of trust under goal number 5, where that really plays out. Oftentimes, if people in communities that feel like they've been marginalized and shut out of the Anne Arundel County dream, if their parents had bad experiences when they were in school, they're not going to open up to you, right? So part of it is, for me as a superintendent, having to get out and trying to re-engage those families and those parents and say, hey, we're here, we're going to listen to you, but we also want to know that if things are happening in the community, like, we need to be given a heads up. It also requires, from this dynamic of how we utilize our school resource officers, right? So if the school resource officers feel more like police than they do just another adult advocate in our schools, these kids won't feel like they can lower their guards and share that something is coming down the pipeline. So I sit on the National Association of School Resource Officer Boards, the largest school policing agency in the country to do training. And I've been on that board since 2015. And I think a lot of it is helping to work with our school resource officers in a way where they're more than just security in the school. They're mentors, they're advocates, they're coaches. And they're doing, and I met one yesterday at Phoenix Academy. He's the SRO at Phoenix Academy, but he's the head basketball coach at Annapolis. And it's those kind of things that's going to help create this culture of trust where kids feel like it's okay to let somebody know that something's bad going to happen because I don't want to see this spill into the school. So it's all about relationship building, and that just doesn't happen overnight, Councilman Gay. It's going to be a process, but I'm committed to working with our team to build those relationships.
Good questions, Alderman Gay. I've got a feeling that I want you to take a look at after. If you can. I didn't know you did that. That's awesome. I'm going to keep swapping sides of the room. Alderman Finlayson, you always say I don't go to you. Anything? No? Yeah.
Well, I didn't have a question, but I could make a comment. I'd just like to thank Dr. Vidal for sharing your vision with us. You know, I'm a former educator. It's always at my heart, and I keep it in front of my colleagues, even though we don't have a direct connection. But I like the way you're going. And particularly when it relates to paying our teachers and paying our staff, really. You know, when I left, we had just acquired, we negotiated 3 6s, and that put us in the top 5. And I'm very disappointed to see where we are now. But you have a plan to get us back to where we belong. So I just want to say officially, thank you for sharing all of this information with us. And, you know, I'm here to support you in whatever fashion possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Savage. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, thanks to my colleague from Ward 6 here for bringing up Georgetown. I hope to, if I have time, get into that a little more. But first, a lot of other things. Thank you both for coming to attend today, and my colleague from Ward 3 for getting this set up. I do agree that this is been a long time coming. Since I've been on the council for, was it 5 years now, we haven't had this dialogue with the school district. And, you know, I think even though we don't have control over the school district, our constituents don't realize that. So they still come to us with all the complaints and everything here. So, and I hope to relay a few of those to you. But we also don't, at least for me personally, I can't always give good answers because we don't have this regular communication. So thank you for your concern over teacher pay. I have a number of friends who are teachers, and it's been tough for them. And they feel that they have not always been strongly supported, but I can see that that's, you have a desire to change that.
Can I say this?
Yeah.
Kansas City Public School District is a 100% free and reduced lunch school district. I experienced 12 to 15 kids being murdered every year in that school district that I was there. And it took a toll on my family and I, which was, you know, the reason why we made a decision to leave, because your body can't continue to take that kind of toxic stress just from a mourning standpoint. And it wasn't just that, it was some community safety dynamics that my wife was like, we're done, we're leaving, right? I was in a great situation here, one of the best contracts in the country. They were gonna renew me this February. So I didn't leave because I couldn't do the job anymore, right? But what I did do in that district that is probably one of the harder to staff school districts was we worked hard to show an appreciation for our staff while we worked to get their salaries to a very competitive spot. And in 2019, we opened up the school year with only 7 teacher vacancies. And in 2020, we opened the school year up with only 3. We opened up the school year here with 300. We're down to 194 now. So we still have a lot of vacancies. And as a result of all of those vacancies, with over 200 food service employees, because they just can't earn a livable wage, bus driver vacancies, this board has agreed to do something for our staff that will come out on the 5th to show their appreciation for the fact that these people are having to take on larger loads, because when you don't have teachers, somebody's got to teach them. So now these classes go from maybe 25 kids to 32, 33 a load. And that's a lot. And then on top of that, you have people in central office that I haven't even really had a chance to get to know, because they all have been working in our schools every day. I have deputy superintendents who will go to schools and substitute. So these people are going above and beyond. And yes, I'm not able to pay them what they deserve, but what we're trying to do now is show them the type of appreciation that we have for them so they don't quit on us, especially over the holiday break, because you have 2 weeks to sit back and think, do I really want to come back and deal with this? And there are people who will probably say, I'm done. We're down 600,000 teachers from 2000 nationally. So it is a field that is struggling from a recruitment standpoint. So we are doing some of those things to show our appreciation and to buy us some time while I work to lobby and negotiate with the county to make sure that we're paying our people more. And the district is experiencing growth. But if we can't meet the demand of the growth by matching it with the teachers and the staff that we need, our kids aren't going to get what they need, and these people are going to find other places to go to. So we got to figure out how we keep the people we have while becoming more competitive to recruit people, because there's something good about this system that we grew 1,400 students this year. Now, I can't go to the county and say, we need to match the growth of these kids with more teachers. Because if I'm sitting behind the diocese and a superintendent comes to me with that, and then I'm going to ask the question of the superintendent, well, don't you have 194 vacancies right now? Shouldn't you fill those first? Can't come back on that question. So at the end of the day, I'd rather ask for us to be able to compensate our people better so we can fill those positions. And as they get filled, we'll have growth. And we'll be able, because of that growth, to continue to bring in more teachers, because now part of that growth allows for us to be more competitive with our salaries too. So that's the focus, and the reason why I'm really trying to push this for our workforce. If we get everybody to $18 at a minimum, start $18 at a minimum for my lowest employees, that knocks out Panera Bread, that knocks out Walmart, that knocks out McDonald's, that knocks out Chick-fil-A and places like that. That right there will probably knock that 203 count of food service employees down to 103 instantly.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you. And I, one of my best, closest friends is a special education teacher, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I also heard quite a number of concerns, from that subgroup of teachers.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
Got some things coming down the pipeline.
Good. And so one of the other issues I wanted to get into is having to do with school capacity, and in particular, Annapolis High School. And it was recently brought to my attention by our Planning and Zoning Department that I think it was around 67% of the students who attend Annapolis High School are from the city. And which kind of I found, I don't know why I was surprised by that, but I guess what surprised me was that so many of our students attend, but I felt like we didn't have this good dialogue with the district about, trying to get improvements there. And so, looking at the utilization charts, we see basically the high school is currently over capacity, 109%. In projected enrollment in 2023, it's 113%. The utilization in 2024, 117. And so we have a school APF, adequate public facilities requirement in our code. And so that's 100%. So if the schools are at 100% capacity, the development basically has to wait 5 years. But one of the key components of that is, and even in our APF, one of the compromises, and I think it was unanimously passed with the compromise, but it was to subtract out the the non-sector students, the students who are coming from the magnet from other sector programs, I guess, from other communities. But even after subtracting out the students in 2024, the school is still projected to be over capacity at 103%. And that's based on an estimation. So it's one of the things we have, as our planning and zoning expressed to us, we have various development goals, growth goals in the city. And so the capacity issue is a concern from that end, but the obvious intent of the capacity is that we have heard a lot of concerns about crowded schools and the quality in that regard at the high school. And so the APF's intention is to try to resolve that. Now, the aspect of our APF that works to resolve that is the mitigation component to that. And so there is a clause in there that allows the city to require developers to pay into some kind of effort to help mitigate and address this overcrowding situation. Right now, at least that I'm aware, we've not been presented with any kind of mitigation opportunity for the developers. So the city essentially is going to be, a certain development in the city is going to be shut off right now. While the county is still going to move forward, I think, with a lot of their growth, the city's going to be shut down. I know that we're talking about having maybe certain areas to exclude, like the county's doing with parole, but that still doesn't get to the underlying issue of how do we improve the situation at the high school, right? And so I guess that's the first thing I'm asking is if you could, I guess, give us some mitigation options for we can help. I think we would gladly try to have the developers contribute to that rather than the taxpayers footing the bill for any kind of improvement.
It's a simple answer. We have to redistrict. That's the answer. And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But if, we say that we have 10,000 seats and we have aspects of this county that hasn't been touched, that need to be touched, we have to do it. And it's one of the nastiest processes that you can go through as a superintendent outside of closing schools. And we talked about it today. So we will have a conversation, administration and board. We're looking at probably December 16th.
Yeah, I think so.
And so we have to have this conversation, and is it a phased process? Is it doing it all at once? We're going to talk about that on the 16th. But this is the only way that you're going to fix this problem is you have to redistrict, maximize the seats that you have, because to me, just from an economic common sense standpoint, how can I continue to go to the county and say, I need capital money to do this and this and this, and we haven't done internally the work that we need to do to right-size the school district with the growth. And then we have some buildings that are sitting at 80% capacity, somewhere in that range. I'm just looking at my team, some lower, right? And you have some like what's happening over here at Annapolis. So I'm also trying to be strategic and not get ran out of town, right? Because I just like to have real talk with everybody. Like, I didn't survive in Kansas City for 6 years in a district that couldn't keep a superintendent more than 1.8 years over a 27-year period before I got there by jumping into the fire on everything. So we have to be strategic. We have to there has to be some political capital built here, and we have to have support from people like you all, right? When this thing hit the fan, and all of a sudden now it goes both ways. You're gonna have people in this community saying, I don't want to go to South River. I don't want to go to South River. I want to stay in Annapolis. You're going to have vice versa. So it's one of those dynamics where something has to give, and the school districts also got to have a little bit of a safety net from this council in addition to the county council when we get ready to go at this. And we're going to have to be courageous about doing it. And it's something that people are afraid to do, but it's a necessity that has to be done, and we're going to have to do it.
If I could add as well, I think one of the reasons that the board so enthusiastically sought to hire Dr. Bedell is that we appreciate that he has a way of doing things, which is exactly what you've just seen, which is to lay it out and help the whole community understand what's necessary. And we've all got to row in this boat together, basically. And we do need your help with regard to advocacy, with regard to Annapolis, standing up when we do go forward with what is going to be a long and complicated and frankly historic redistricting effort. We're going to have to make sure that everybody who's got skin in this game is part of the conversation. And let me just add something. Dr. Bedell spent a lot of time talking about our commitment to equity. I just think it has to be said, we are never, ever going to address some of the basic systemic inequities in this county until we deal with some of this redistricting, quite frankly. Because we know, you can look at the map, you can see the places that have somehow been protected and where people have lots of space for their kids and the places where they don't. Annapolis is one of them, North County is one of them. I mean, we see it. So we understand this is very difficult. We also understand as a board, and I'll say this as president, this man has to stay and do the things that he's committed to doing, that we're committed to doing, that he is uniquely the right person to lead us through. So we want to make sure that this is laid out for the public as transparently as possible. There are no surprises. I think that's our mantra.
That's right.
No surprises. And that we speak, certainly from the board and Dr. Bedell's perspective as the leadership of ACPS, we speak with a unified voice, and we hope that we can work with you and speak with a unified voice, the county council, the county executive. You've got to lay the groundwork for these things so everybody understands what's at stake and where we're headed. So I think, Mr. Savage, you've hit on something really critical here. Certainly as the representative for Annapolis, I'm acutely aware of the overcrowding. We've got to address it. And we've got to address the fact that our most overcrowded schools, I mean, Annapolis this year is now at 60% farms. That's up from 51
What's farms?
free and reduced price
yes,
meals,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
which is, generally the sort of rough proxy for the level of poverty that you have among your students. And that's up from 51 like a year and a half ago. And so, the kids who most need to have the facilities that can support their learning don't. And we have to fix that. But that's going to take real guts and real courage, not just from us. And we're committed as a board. Maybe we should be committed, I don't know. But it's going to take guts from everybody who's representing the people for whom this is necessary. So I'd just like to invite all of you to understand that we need you, and we are here to start a conversation, not end one. I hope we'll be back, because we need to keep having these conversations so we can serve the children. Too often, the children who aren't heard and who aren't seen.
I carry this book around. This is where I take a lot of my notes. And it reads, once you become fearless, life becomes limitless. This is one of those things that insert fear in you, but you have to do it. You have to do it. And I did make the comment, like, I don't want to get run out of town. And I think there's a way we can do that where I don't get run out of town. So I want you to know, like, I don't have any fear in doing it. I've told this board, and they've heard this. I mean, at the end of the day, it don't work out for me. I don't need to be a superintendent to survive. I'm going to be okay. So there's no fear in doing what I need to do, what's right. But I do want to be around to see through the things that I talk to you about, around how we can help this school district become great. So that's the reason why we have to, it's okay to not be fearless, but you can't be reckless. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, because I've only visited like 40 to maybe 42 schools. And so we're getting ready to talk about redistricting, and there's a lot of communities I haven't even been in. I don't even know where kids will go from one area to another. So we don't want to be reckless in this process. And as Dr. Tobin said, like, when we put out our communication, if we're doing this in phases, we just got to be honest with people. There are going to be some families that might get redistricted twice, right? Depending on where they live on the boundaries of a certain area. But we just got to be truthful about it. I don't want to put a family through that, but it's something that we have to do. We just have to do it. And so that will be our conversation on December 16th.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I think the communication will be key, I think, to make sure you're not run out, right? and that's what I've said this to other, not the school district necessarily, but to other aspects of the county, and that, because many of us have our own networks of constituents.
Yes.
Many of us hold town hall meetings, and would love to have one or both of you at a town hall meeting sometime.
Anytime.
Even before the redistricting conversation gets started. And back to that, I guess maybe we could have a separate meeting with some planning and zoning and some other folks who might be interested from the council. But as far as the APF, because I guess I personally would want to get a better understanding of when that might, sounds like a big process. And to be honest, I don't know too much about how that happens. I was around, I think last time when it was discussed a little bit, but as far as when we might expect that, because that is obviously going to impact what kind of development happens in the city. So I think we need to know if, for example, if we think districting may happen by a certain year, maybe we can plan on that and factor that into some of the projection.
Yeah.
But in any case, we can maybe talk more about that separately. And personally, just my son we're planning on sending my son to the high school, which brings in the personal interest of my own and obviously my neighbors, which Ms. Tobin and I think are mutual friends and neighbors.
To Annapolis?
Concerned. Yes, to Annapolis High School.
Yes, my
Yeah.
sixth grader, that's where she's on to go to.
My
So maybe
daughter's-
they'll be in school together.
My daughter's a 2020 graduate. You couldn't go to a better school.
Good. Yeah. And currently my son's being homeschooled. My wife went through the school system, but she said there's no way she wants to send our son to Annapolis Middle School. We're trying to get in debates through a magnet, but that's, I think, speaks to some of the dialogue you were talking about, conversation with the community. And my wife who went through it, I can't argue with her because I didn't go through school here. I was in Pennsylvania, but that's kind of thing with that. But also going back to the Georgetown East school, is I brought this up, I think, to the school district a couple years ago about more conversations with the school. With the neighborhoods. Because with Georgetown East, I didn't realize until we looked at the feeder system, it goes all the way down to Bay Ridge community. And there were a whopping 0 students who actually attended from Bay Ridge. And I was just floored when I saw that. And my wife, when we first moved in, we tried to get some neighbors together to go in to help just collectively send all our kids there. But we didn't quite have, she felt like she didn't quite have support. And I brought up years ago, I wonder if the school district could provide more support to some of the parents and maybe even frankly do some marketing to try to, because a lot of times all we see online are the numbers posted on these ranking sites, which I know have the built-in biases and problems, but that's all people see. And so in that aspect, again, the communication I think would be good. And I've had constituents contact me who, was this a good place to move in? Or they'll say, we just moved in, but we're a little concerned about schools. What can you tell us about it? And
Yeah.
so there's always...
I think that's phenomenal that you brought that up, because I was at an event. I don't know what park it was. One of the first events I went to.
At Eastport United Methodist.
I was at that event, and there was a parent who came up to me and said, "Hey, Dr. Biddle, nice to meet you. I'm thinking about, moving to a different part of the county because I don't, want my kid to go to Annapolis High School," something like that. So I had to explain to her that you can't go off of those ratings, because to me, there's bias inserted in those ratings based on the socioeconomic status of the kids who show up. Annapolis is probably a 7 in the school district that I came from. It's probably one of the higher performing schools in the district that I came from. And so I think sometimes that data is misleading. I have every bit of confidence as a superintendent that my daughter's going to get a great education at Annapolis High School. And that's where she will go. But I just think to your point, we have to do a better job of kind of creating and telling that narrative about what our schools have to offer. I took over a low-performing school in Houston, Booker T. Washington High School, and the High School for Engineering Professions. And it really wasn't what it was made out to be. It's a phenomenal high school, right? But we changed that narrative on how we promoted and marketed the school. We partnered with Comcast. We got 30-second commercials, and we really promoted our high school. That high school was low performing because it didn't meet adequate yearly progress. Y'all remember No Child Left Behind, right? But after my first year being there, we turned that high school around, and by the end of my 3rd year, we were only 7 students away from it being a recognized high school. And the point that I'm making to you is that grade school report wasn't telling the story of where that high school actually was, where it actually were. I sent more kids to MIT out of that school than the whole Houston Independent School District. And that school district is the 7th largest in the country with 203,000 students when I was there. So so to your point, that's on us. We have to make sure that we're telling the story of our schools. Y'all got a good school system here. Make no mistakes about And I feel guilty some days, like, dang, I can't believe I landed this job. I can't believe people complaining like this. I told you that at dinner. People complaining. I'm like, let me take you somewhere for 3 weeks. You come back here and you'd be thankful. So I'm done.
Could I just add something super quick to your point about telling the story, but also the supports, and also thinking a little differently about what we have to offer. I think it's fair to say Dr. Bedell and I talked very early on about my desire, and I think something he shares, to begin to set up some dual language immersion enrollment schools. And, that is something, we got a couple schools that could pivot to that very quickly.
We will.
And we will. And that too, when you have programs like that, those programs are for everybody. They're not just for the ELL students, right? I mean, first of all, from the ELL perspective, the data show very clearly that students who are learning English learn it better in a bilingual environment than they do in the typical ELL environment. And they do not lose their first language. And many of our ELL students have parents who are not literate in either Spanish or English, right? So the kids will be getting both. But beyond that, there are other families who want their kids in dual language, right? Because talk about a global skill. Yeah. So those are the things I think that Dr. Bedell is open to, knows how to stand up, and that I think will significantly change, certainly the Annapolis cluster, but throughout the county, and begin to change the narrative in a lot of ways that are really important. And the rap has been bad on Annapolis cluster schools, for example, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. So.
If I could shift real quick, I have to get this one question in here about the electric buses, which was mentioned, because it was mentioned to me that Montgomery County has a plan to go all electric, and I know we have a lot of other issues to focus on, but I am curious if that's at least on your radar for the future to look at possibly developing a plan for that transition.
I think that's the conversation.
Yeah, it's pricey.
It's very pricey, and the concern will always be around the life of it. So we just have to figure all of that out. But we do want to be, do our part to be a clean school district, a green school district, a lead school district. So yeah.
And the vans are more efficient than the buses, so that's a small efficiency as we move forward.
Can we go across the room, Alderman Tierney?
I didn't know I was next. Welcome back, Joanne.
Good to see you.
and Juwan, I had a vision of you overlooking me at a dentist chair.
You might want to talk to Dr. Bedell.
Yeah, it's rough right now.
But Doctor, I love what you heard. Just very briefly, I know everybody idols their dad, but my dad I considered he was pretty brilliant. He got, self-educated, got his master's, his PhD in physics, but he chose to teach at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and he was teaching physics, to kids that were learning about optics, and he made it interesting. And I remember sitting in on some of his classes, and I thought, gee, what a guy. But, when I first got my job, I remember I was making my first year more than he ever made, trying to support, 7 kids. I still don't know how he did it. And he died relatively young, so that's probably why. But so I just really applaud you on the value to the teachers as well as to community education. My question is, and it's two philosophical questions. One is well, maybe not philosophical. It's pretty easy. What is your idea of a balanced classroom, a number of students per teacher? Like, do you have is that relevant? Does that come up in the discussion about school crowding? Is that what it comes down to? Is the class sizes? And do you have a threshold where you think, oh no, it doesn't work?
over
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think anytime, so I'll just go from my years as an elementary teacher, and you generally don't want to have more than, 22, 23 kids. In your pre-K classes, you generally don't want to have more than 20, but where I came from, the ratio was 16-1. So the ratios fluctuate from place to place. High school, I was a high school principal, so you really would love to have your classes be anywhere, around 23 to 25, because that's a much more manageable load for you. And then when you calculate the fact that you're teaching 6 sections at the high school level, that's 150 kids or so that you're having to do grading for. So, but we have situations because of not having the appropriate staffing where some of these high school classes are sitting at 32, 33, 34 in some cases. You have some sections in your elementary school where some of the class sizes, depending on the size of the elementary school, where they may be sitting with 28 kids. As I've gone into schools, I count every time I go in the classroom.
Yeah.
Now I ask a teacher, how's it going? How are you managing, all of this? So you really want to keep it as low as possible, in order to be able to justify that FTE, which is the full-time equivalency position. 2020 to 23, 24 is a phenomenal number to have.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it's just because I don't know, and I'm a product of public schools, and God, I think there were like 40 in my class. I don't, I didn't wonder I'm the way I am. But anyways, the last question is, what is your strategy, I guess, or philosophy about the safety of schools as it relates to the violence that?
Ultimately, I've shared this with a lot of folks. You can't let 2 or 3 kids kill it for the other 25 or whatever it may be. So, and I don't also believe in artificially putting out data that's not honest, because we don't code kids when they should be suspended. We just tell them go home, and then you don't really know what the problem is and how to fix it. So my attitude is you can minimize discipline by having solid systems in your school, systems that really allow for kids to be rehabilitated. So one of the things that we were able to do in my former district, we got a $3.2 million VOCA grant. Victims of Crime Act grant. We partnered with the Center for Conflict Resolution, and we went through the training as senior level employees around conflict resolution, what restorative circles look like. We ended up rewriting our student code of conduct, and it was implemented last year was the first year, this is year 2 of it, where we don't suspend kids for level 1, level 2, and most level 3 infractions in grades K through 6. Rather, we staff the school with someone that they can go to this room and get the therapeutic supports and the restorative supports, so that they don't miss school, because that was hurting us in terms of how our kids are performing on state assessments, but it's also killing us from a funding standpoint, because we're funded by average daily attendance. So we just became creative in doing those things, and these are some of the things that I would like for us to take a look at in this school district over time. I mean, how do we go after some of these grants? And there are a lot of grants out there to address some of the social and emotional distress. And like I said, if you address those things and you create controls for those variables that are often impediments to these kids being able to reach their highest academic potential, then you now have created a system that really now knows how to address discipline in a more proactive manner. But it also gave us money to make sure that we're properly giving our teachers the professional development, so that the punitive things that we were often suspending kids for, that gets addressed through training. It helps people to recognize how their biases and their way of how they see life plays out in a negative way on certain kids.
Mm-hmm. Like your learning experience that you shared.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Give me to come across the other side of the room. Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation and this dialogue. Thank Alderwoman Pendle Charles for remembering that we need this, and I think we will have to do it frequently. In terms of full disclosure, I need to tell you that my sister Marianne works for you at Tyler Heights. So I have some inside information from time to time. I want to put a marker down in something that does not have to do with curriculum, and Dr. Tobin and Mr. Mosier probably know where I'm going, and that is our Title I kids and their food. And we had a breakdown, particularly in the summertime when school isn't in session, where a lot of kids didn't get food, particularly for lunch, because the handoffs were flubbed. So I just want to add that to your already very full agenda, if you're not already aware of it, that food is pretty much as important as learning. So we really need to work on that coordination and make sure those gaps don't occur.
All right, that's good. You just said what I was going to ask. Is that a matter of coordination? So I think you just said it, so.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I would say, because we had a meeting a couple of summers ago and you kindly attended, and I think one of the things that emerged from that meeting, and there were people from the city, there were ACPS folks, Senator Alfrith was there, Delegate Jones was there were a number of people there. And what emerged was we do have an issue in the summer where we have multiple agencies, ACPS being one of them, serving food sites. And what we need, frankly, from the city is somebody who controls that map, who knows what the sites are, where the holes may be, and then can enable the coordination between agencies so that, okay, well, so the schools are over here, maybe there's one we could do over here, and maybe the food bank can run one over here. Because that was the gap that we were finding, is that people were looking to the individual agencies, but the individual agencies, none of them are responsible for the whole. And the city kids were getting lost in that. So thank you for bringing that up.
That's all. Honourable Neil.
Thank you very much.
I've got to give everyone a chance, please. I've got to go across the room.
I just want to say thank you very much for that. I am the mother of 2 children, one that graduated with Dr. Tobin's and one that's a junior. I have 2 questions. Early on in your presentation, you talked about really looking at how we're teaching and, an 8 to 8 possibility or something. I'm not going to hold you to that. I love that idea of thinking outside the box. I have said since 2020 that our school system, our educational system really dropped the ball when they could have made some vast changes and really positive changes, because we had always done things one way. So it's very refreshing to hear you really thinking outside of that box and not just thinking about it, but stomping that box down so that we can really get to that. So I'm looking forward to more of that, even though as a junior, my daughter probably won't be here to see the fruition of that. But I like that idea, especially since we did change school hours this year. And is it too early to tell if there's been a positive, negative, streamlined effect of that change?
I think we will continue to collect data and probably at the end of the first semester, take a look at really how we landed from an attendance rate standpoint. What's hard about that is because this is probably our first true regular year back. No masking, none of the issues with having to shut down classrooms in schools. So it's hard to have reliable data to compare from on last year. So this year, in essence, will probably be more of a baseline year from a data collection standpoint, just as the state assessment piece. That data that's coming in, it's a new assessment. So we don't really, it's apples and oranges to try to compare it back to what happened in 2019. That's really the best answer I have on that. And we'll know more as we collect data. But to go back to your first piece of what you were talking about around innovation, I always say this to people. about education systems. If we were Kodak, if we were Blockbuster, follow me and think where I'm going with this. If we were Circuit City, if we were Service Merchandise, we would be out of business. We get to stay in business in education because we have guaranteed funding every year. Guaranteed. So no matter whether we decide to innovate, no matter whether we try to be able to pivot faster to meet the demands of the market, we don't really have an incentive to do so. And then the other piece is there's a lot of fear within the community of thinking outside the box. Because in my opinion, because of how varied this school district is, in my mind, if I got a rural component of the school district, and we know farming is a real thing out in South County, why wouldn't we look at 4-day schooling out there? And that allow for them to have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to take care of the things they need to take care of, for their businesses. And for the kids who may want to come in because the parents need them in school, we have teachers who are willing to work overtime or work like a summer school teacher to provide interventions for them. Or why wouldn't we take a look at a trimester type calendar in some of our schools? So if we know that poverty clearly plays a role, that our kids in high poverty schools have the greatest level of summer slide in terms of learning, well, why wouldn't we keep them closer to us? Why wouldn't we have schools open from August until November, and then you go into a trimester during the month of, then you go into an intercession during the month of November to help them over those first 3 weeks in November catch up on standards that they didn't learn September, October. Think about it. And then everybody goes on Thanksgiving break during that week of Thanksgiving, and then you start session number 2, trimester number 2. That goes from December through March. Why March? Because March is a spring break month. So then you do intercession 2. So what wasn't learned gets caught during that 3-week period before spring break. Everybody goes on spring break, but the kids who need support, they're getting support for 3 weeks. And the kids who need enrichment can get enrichment. And then you do the 3rd trimester from August through the end of June. So it's like this is the part that scares people because it's non-traditional. But we're in a non-traditional world right now. And we got to explore these things differently. And we can't take this cookie cutter approach that we're utilizing, that everybody in the county gets treated the same way, when the county just simply isn't the same way across the county.
It's like snow days. Snowing in one place and raining in another. Yep, we're all off. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And my last question, I don't want to take up any more time, is that there's a lot of talk about the students. I have a niece who was a kindergarten in 2020, 1920, and there's a lot of talk about how far behind those kids are where they should be. And do we have a plan and a course of action for speeding up those kids besides that trimester that might not happen for a while?
Yeah, so I will tell you that's been a big conversation that we're having with our staff. I know that there's a lot of resources for tutoring and providing the support with our teachers who are able to work before and after school to help our kids. I know we've talked about potential Saturday opportunities for kids to get some supports. But part of our issue that we run into also is absent of being fully staffed. So we've hired like reading interventionists and math interventionists, and these are people that were pulling kids out. So in some cases, we do have schools where kids are being pulled out and they're getting that additional support. And so it's hit and miss. It was hit and miss in Kansas City because the same thing, we weren't fully staffed when we came back to school from COVID. But there is a commitment that as we continue to look at our data, and we're looking at our iReady data, which is our universal screener. The kids have already taken their beginning of year. We looked at that probably 3 weeks ago. And we're going back and we're having those conversations with building principals around what interventions need to look like, how you can work with your kids to get them closer to where they need to be from a standard readiness standpoint. And that's what the instrument does. It's kind of new to this school district. I think they're in year 2 of using it. So we're not experts here. I've been using iReady pretty much since 2018, and that's why you saw all that green on that chart from Kansas City. Big reason because of iReady and being able to have that criteria reference data that we need that's aligned with state standards. So that is kind of, it's folding out across the county, and I'm doing a lot of that in our deep data dives where we're doing a lot of breaking down of data, and then our regional superintendents are doing the same and then working on what those interventions look like to really try to help accelerate learning.
Thank you. I appreciate. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alderman Schennemeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple things. One, first of all, thank you for coming into this with a policy and position of acknowledging data and being willing to shift and adjust and not allowing nostalgia to guide problems of the modern era.
Yes, sir.
Second of all, thank you for acknowledging that we have an issue paying staff. Something personal, a good friend of mine who lives here in the city of Annapolis, she was able to escape an abusive marriage due in large part to a job with the Anne Arundel County Public Schools Library. And it's still tough because, as you know, we have a problem paying our teachers, especially and staff compared to other jurisdictions. And so that commitment and helping her be able to get back on her feet means a whole lot. So I got 3 things that I want to bring forward. One of them is Annapolis Middle School. While technically outside my ward, it sandwiches my ward. It's part of it. A lot of students have to cross Forest Drive, one of the most dangerous urban highways in the county. And about once a year, a kid gets hit around that crosswalk, just outside my neighborhood, just outside Annapolis Middle School, because they're 11 through 13-year-old kids. They do dumb stuff. We all did dumb stuff when we were 11 through 13.
Yeah, we did.
So something I would wonder is, would you be willing to be a partner in going forward to the county and asking them to do things to improve student safety in that, mainly trying to slow down the traffic?
Absolutely.
Thank you. The other question is, this is something I've been talking to Chief Jackson about. I've spoken with my colleague who chairs public safety, Alderman Pindell Charles, about a program that Boston implemented called Operation Ceasefire. Are you familiar with Operation Ceasefire, sir?
No.
A very dumbed down version of explaining it is teachers and resource officers and guidance counselors in our schools, they have a good understanding of the students and young folks who are more likely to get involved with violence. And basically it's teaming up with them and our local police and our county police, just kind of talk to them and give students a healthy outlet to solve issues and disputes without them escalating to the point of homicides. We have had a very large problem with youth violence here in our city and nationwide. And it's been a program that was successful in Boston, trying to get it off the ground with your predecessor, but he didn't like me because I was mean to him on some other stuff. So my defense, he deserved it. But finally, I want to talk adequate public facilities. So I have vocally made my disdain for adequate public facilities laws known. And it sums down to one key reason. If I can get Mr. Lashinsky from Planning and Zoning up to a microphone. You knew I was going to do this, man. You knew I was going to do this.
Yeah.
I am anything but orthodox. Mr. Lashinsky, would you say our adequate public facility law makes it more difficult or less difficult to build in a denser pattern?
First, let me introduce myself. I'm Chief of Comprehensive Planning for the City of Annapolis, and we have been having a lot of discussions about our adequate public facilities as they relate to schools. And I think one of the issues that we're confronting is that, well, Annapolis is the densest part of the county where all the infrastructure is. The school's APF makes it difficult to continue to develop in the city. And so right now, I think what the alderman is alluding to is that from a development perspective, the way the school's APF works for the county and for the city, development is being encouraged to places where the school seats are, where there are available seats, which may be not the best places to develop from all kinds of other reasons, so encouraging sprawl and so forth. So, so I mean, I think that's what the alderman is getting at. It's, to kind of build in a smarter, denser, more connected way, Annapolis is sort of part of that equation.
Right. And that's where I was going at. By these adequate public facilities ordinances encouraging more development into less dense areas, we are essentially guaranteeing that we will not have the funding to actually have adequate public facilities. Because as I've shared with my colleagues, a revenue map per acre of the city of Annapolis showing that the denser areas of the city gain higher revenue through acre, which is important considering a lot of our funding for these programs and services we provide is done through property tax. And then we have recently approved a land value study, which I believe we'll be signing the company who will be conducting the survey very soon, and it's going to show us all the way down to revenue and expenditures per parcel that our code and land use and adequate public facilities guidelines essentially guarantees that we are losing money and unable to actually fund the expanded capacity that we need for our schools. We're hamstringing ourselves. I don't want overcrowded schools, but I am acknowledging that these laws that force things to spread out more and more and more and more and more guarantee that we are not going to actually be able to fund them in a way that solves the problem. And what it also does on top of that is it continues to throw gasoline on the fire that is our housing crisis, which is essentially guaranteeing that our students, when they graduate high school, when they graduate college or community college or trade school, they're not able to actually afford to live in the city that they grew up in. And that has a massive impact on communities as well. So through these programs and policies that we implement, and I really strongly believe that we need to take a hard look at, we're essentially hamstring ourselves and guaranteeing we're never going to be able to solve the problem of school capacity, especially considering when the county is pushing more growth that is still in Annapolis but outside the city limits, forces us to lose our own funding on other sources as well. So, sorry to bore you with the conversation on land use, but considering a lot of your funding comes from our property taxes dictated by it, felt it was relevant. So I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time to talk to us today.
Well, thank you for that lesson.
I'm going to release your witness. I'm going to release your witness. Are you saying that?
Let me just take a personal moment and say that Mr. Schandelmeyer has appeared in at least one play with my husband, and I'm well aware of his theatrical capacity. Bravo.
So Alderman Pinnell-Charles and then Alderman Gay, and we're nearly at 5 o'clock. So
Yeah.
I was going to give Rhonda the last word, but then Dewan put his hand up. So.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have to get the physical therapy. Y'all see that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goodell and Dr. Tobin, for coming. A couple of things. The history of this county when it comes to the school system, in many ways, and I can speak personally, as a student, when I left Walt S. Mills, well, it was Parole Elementary then, to go to Annapolis Junior High, it was the year of desegregation, and it was horrendous. We then went on to Annapolis High School, and it was more horrendous. It was, when I look back on it and talk to classmates, it was clinically traumatic, and I can share that with you at another time. So as a student, it was not good. My children went through the same schools I did here. There were some issues there as well. So as a parent, there was some problems. And then as an employee, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, there were times that I could tell you about where it was not good there either. So I've had 3 levels of issues. Now, I'm not saying it was all everybody else's fault. I'm not going to say that. At some points, I contributed to myself. but it was not overall the best experience that someone could have. I was with the school system for 16 years. At 7.5 years, I was at Frank Herbert Harmon Elementary School, and I was housed in the Learning Lab. I requested that because I wanted to see what the students saw and what staff saw, and it was a great learning experience for me, and I was glad that I did it. So I understand when you talked about discipline, I think our school at that point handled things very well. But I'm not a teacher by trade, but what I could see, it was a great experience, and I'm so glad I did it. As far as paying employees, I couldn't say it enough. We struggle with our budget as well. We talk about, and we've just gone through a series of negotiations. I think that's extremely important that we pay people for what they're worth. Otherwise, in this competitive state, we lose out. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the people that are here in this room, since you are new to this area. And we have our city manager, Mr. Mike Malinoff, here with us today. We have Mr. Michael LaPlace here, who's our Director of Planning and Zoning. And of course, you've met Mr. Lashinsky as well. I had invited Mr. Peter Nesbitt here today, who is the Executive Director for the Mitchell Art Gallery at St. John's College. So I wanted him to hear as well. And also, I invited our public safety team. I did get word that Chief Jackson and Deputy Chief Bradford were not able to come today, but we do have Chief Romali here today, who is our chief of our fire department, and our Office of Emergency Management Chief, Mr. Kevin Simmons, as well. So just want to make sure that you recognize, and we recognize Ms. Jackson here today, who just came to us less than a month ago as a teacher in Prince George's County Public Schools. So she has, I could see her face, and she was very involved in what you were saying. But anyway, leading up to Director Simmons and I had a meeting yesterday with our opioid intervention team, which is statewide. And one of the issues that came up was naloxone and Narcan and the distribution of that. And one of the issues is how do we do a better job of specifically distributing that and getting the word out? And Anne Arundel County Public Schools was one of the venues that we talked about, and there were different suggestions made, say putting them in, now we didn't talk about the legal implications, but possibly putting them in bathrooms, restroom stalls, on the buses, PSAs and posters in strategic locations in the schools. We've had an increase this year from, I think, 4 to 11 in our SAD chapters, and maybe in the high school, using them as a vehicle. And Pam Jordan had mentioned that, as well as talking about the extension of the SAD programs, placing them next to AEDs, and also having the vending machines and training students in administering. And we had looked at a whole list of things, but like I said, we did not talk about the implications legally. So do you have any response to mental health? And we want to hear from you regarding maybe even when it comes to a substance use disorder within our schools.
Yeah, I think this is one of those conversations. First of all, I think we were presented with that yesterday, so I haven't had time to look into it to even be able to tell you what we're doing as a school district in that area. It will be a part of our conversation that we have on Monday when I meet with my executive team, so we can then potentially get with the appropriate staff to talk about, you know, some of these ideals that you've all presented to us as it pertains to opioids. So, I mean, honestly, that's all I have. I tell people I'm not going to waste time trying to make up an answer that I don't have.
Thank you so much for being so candid, and thank you for being here and for the board's unanimous decision on bringing you to our county school system. We are very thrilled. At least I know I can speak for myself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I have. I don't know all of my team, but I know Bob Mosier for certain.
Who doesn't know Bob?
Bob Mosier is our Chief Communication Officer, and I guess would say regarded as one of the best, definitely in the state of Maryland, but around the country. He is one sharp guy, and I don't.
Mr. Stewart.
Greg Stewart.
Yeah.
Greg Stewart, and we just talked a few minutes ago. So
I'm the Senior Manager of Planning for Public Schools, so I deal with the ADI.
Yeah.
And then Alderman Gay with one quick question.
No, not a quick question. I just forgot. Please fund AVID. It's so incredibly important, and the teachers fight every year. Stephanie Great, who I love so much. Please just make sure we fund that. Thank you.
Oh, Avid, I love Avid too. That's, man. Okay, yes,
So
sir.
I wanted to say huge thank you. My wife is a graduate of Annapolis High. I went through the school system here. I'm a proud father of kids that went to Annapolis Elementary, Annapolis Middle, and then my oldest is about to graduate Annapolis High, so he's going to miss all the amazing results. I think we hit the lottery with you. I'm so excited that we have an innovator, an out-of-the-box thinker. I think we've got a great team here, passionate community that will be behind you 100%, and this was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
And Miss Cindy Gaines, our clerk, and our city attorney, Mr. Lyons.
Right. Nice to meet you all. So I do have one request of you all. We talk about lobbying and we talk about where we rank. You saw the slides on how our people are being compensated here. By all means, I don't want to pay any more taxes. I literally don't feel a difference in what I'm making now than what I was making in Kansas City, and I got a raise. I just don't feel it. So, but I also know that the viability of this school district is dependent upon the type of people that we bring in here to educate and work with our kids. And we have this tax cap, and I don't know that it's even been maxed out. If it hasn't been maxed out, it needs to be maxed out. And that money, in my opinion, needs to go to support the kind of work that we're trying to do to be competitive in this school district. You have a competitive school district that is regarded as one of the best in the country. Economic development truly becomes a reality. Growth becomes a reality because everybody's going to want to come out here and they're going to want to live out here just off of how our schools perform. We don't properly fund these schools, it will be the opposite. We will start to see a decline in enrollment, and eventually nobody ever wants to talk about having to close schools because enrollment is declining because we're not able to properly staff or properly educate these kids. And that could become the beginning of the demise of what I think happens to be a really nice place to live, a great part of this country. But we have to become competitive with Howard County, Montgomery County, and PG County if we're gonna have a chance in this highly competitive market right now.
Definitely hear you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. Good luck with your physiotherapy.
I know.
I need your drinking arm back. Here we go again.
Hey, I know it is. It is that arm.
Mr. City Attorney, please present the next on the agenda.
The agenda is complete, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.